Hey everyone, it's time for another Flora and Ulysses read aloud. I'm just going to post one video since we're doing 3 of these a week, but it's going to be about 15-20 minutes. So if you need to take a break, if you need to get up, if you need to turn the video off for a while, then come back, just do it. Just hit pause, go do what you need to do, and to have a break, and then come back. So I'll leave the break up to you. If you want to listen all the way through, great. If you need a little rest, that's fine too. Do what works for you. Chapter 37, Singing with the Angels. He woke with a single giant watery eye staring at him. He blinked. His head hurt. The gigantic eye was mesmerizing and beautiful. It was like staring at a small planet, a whole sad and lonely world. Ulysses found it hard to look away. He stared at the eye, and the eye stared back. Was he dead? Had he been hit over the head with a shovel? He could hear someone singing. He knew he should be afraid, but he didn't feel afraid. So much had happened to him in the last 24 hours that somewhere along the way, he had stopped worrying. Everything had become interesting, as opposed to worrisome. If he was dead, well, that was interesting too. "My eyesight is not what it was," said a voice, "when I was a girl in Blundermeakin. I could read the sign before anyone even saw the sign. Not that it helped me, seeing things clearly. Sometimes it is safer not to see. In Blundermeakin, the words on the sign were often not the truth. And I ask you, what good does it do to read the words of a lie? But that is a different story I'll tell you later. I find this magnifying glass to be of great assistance. Yes, I see him. Very much alive." "I know he's alive," said another voice. "I can tell that." Flora was here with him. Oh, how comforting. Yes, I see. He's a squirrel." "For the love of Pete," said Flora, "I know he's a squirrel." "He's missing much fur," said the voice. "What kind of doctor are you?" The voices in the room kept singing. They were full of sadness and love and desperation. The voices belonging to the giant eye hummed along with them. Ulysses tried to get to his feet, and a gentle hand pushed him back. "I am Dr. Measham, who is the doctor of philosophy," said the voice. "My husband, the other Dr. Measham, was a medical doctor, but he passed away. That is a euphemism, of course. A euphemism is another way of saying figure of speech. I mean to say that he is dead. He has departed from this world. He is elsewhere, singing with the angels." Ha! Another euphemism, singing with the angels. I ask you, why is it so hard to stay away from euphemisms? They creep in, always, and attempt to make difficult things more pleasing. So, let me try again. He is dead, the other Dr. Measham, the medical doctor, and I hope he is somewhere singing, perhaps singing something from Mozart, but who knows where he is and what he is doing? "For the love of Pete," said Flora again, "I need a medical doctor. Ulysses might have a concussion." "Shh, calm down. Why are you so agitated? There is no need to worry. You're worried about what? You'll tell me what happened that makes you think concussion." "He hit a door," said Flora, "with his head." Yes, that could give a concussion. When I was a girl in Blundermeakin, people would often get concussions. From the trolls, you understand." "The trolls?" said Flora. "What are you talking about? Look at him. Does he look like he has a concussion?" The giant eye of Dr. Measham came closer, much closer. It studied him. The beautiful voices sang. Dr. Measham hummed. Ulysses felt strangely peaceful. If he spent the rest of his life being stared at by a giant eye and hummed over, things could be worse. "The pupils of his little eyes are not dilated," said Dr. Measham. "Dilated pupils," said Flora. "I couldn't remember that one." "So, this is good. This is a hopeful sign. Next we will see if he remembers what happened. We will check for amnesia." Flora's face came into view. He was glad to see her and her round head. "Ulysses," she said, "do you remember what happened? Do you remember being in the giant donut?" Did he remember being in Rita's hair? Did he remember Rita screaming? Did he remember the man with the knife? Did he remember flying? Did he remember hitting his head very hard? Did he remember not getting to eat a giant donut? Let's see. Yes, 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 and yes. He nodded. "Oh," said Dr. Measham, "he nods his head. He communicates with you." "He's, different. Special," said Flora. "A special kind of squirrel." "Excellent! Good! I believe this." Yeah, he hit a door with his head." "Oh, no," said Flora. "Before that, he was vacuumed. You know, sucked up by a vacuum cleaner." There was a small silence, and then a humming from Dr. Measham. Ulysses tried again to get to his feet and was pushed gently back. "You are not speaking in euphemisms," said Dr. Measham. "I'm not," said Flora. "I'm speaking literally. He was vacuumed, and it changed him." "Certainly it did," said Dr. Measham. "Absolutely. It changed him to be vacuumed." She raised her magnifying glass to her eye and leaned in close, studying him. She lowered the magnifying glass. "How did it change him, please?" Ulysses stood on all fours, and no one pushed him back. "You will speak without euphemisms," said Dr. Measham. "He has powers," Flora said. "He's strong, and he can fly." She paused. "Also, he types. He writes, poetry." "A typewriter? Poetry? Flight," said Dr. Measham. She sounded delighted. "His name is Ulysses." "This," said Dr. Measham, "is an important name." "Well," said Flora, "it's the name of the vacuum cleaner that almost killed him." Dr. Measham looked Ulysses in the eye. Ulysses pulled himself up straighter. He looked back at Dr. Measham. He met her gaze. "You must also list among his powers the ability to understand," said Dr. Measham. "That is no small thing, to understand." Then she turned back to Ulysses. "You are maybe feeling a little sick to your stomach?" Ulysses shook his head. "Good," said Dr. Measham, and she clapped her hands together. "I am thinking that Ulysses is not concussed. There is only a little cut on his head. Other than that, fine, good, great. I am thinking maybe the squirrel is hungry." Ulysses nodded. Yes, yes, he was very hungry. He would like eggs, sunny side up. He would like a donut with sprinkles. Chapter 38. Unremitting Darkness. "You," said Dr. Measham to Flora, "will have a seat on the sofa and listen to Mozart, and I will go and make us some sandwiches." "Oh, what about my father?" said Flora. "Shouldn't I tell him where I am?" "Mr. George Buckman knows where you are," said Dr. Measham. "He knows you're safe. So, good. All is good. You will sit on the horsehair sofa, please." Dr. Measham went into the kitchen, and Flora turned and looked at the couch. It was a huge couch. She dutifully sat down on it and then slowly, very slowly, slid off. "Wow," she said. She climbed back up on the couch and concentrated on staying put. She sat with her hands on either side of her legs, straight out in front of her. She felt like an oversized doll. She also felt very, very tired and a tiny bit confused. "Maybe I'm in shock," she thought. Terrible Things Can Happen to You had done an issue listing the symptoms of shock, but Flora couldn't remember what they were. Was one of the symptoms of shock that you couldn't remember the symptoms of shock? She looked over at Ulysses. He was still sitting on the dining room table. He looked confused, too. She waved at him. He nodded back. And then she noticed that there was a picture hanging on the wall opposite the couch. It was a painting of what looked like nothing but darkness. Unremitting darkness. Unremitting darkness was a phrase that occurred often in The Criminal Element. But why would someone paint a picture of unremitting darkness? Flora slid off the couch and walked over to the painting and stared at it more closely. In the middle of all the darkness, there was a tiny boat. It was floating on a black sea. Flora put her face right up against the painting. Something was wrapped around the boat. Some tentacled shadow. For the love of Pete, the tiny boat on the dark sea was getting eaten by a giant squid. Flora's heart protested with a small thud of fear. "Holy bagumba," she whispered. From the kitchen there came the sound of clinking silverware and crashing plates. The opera music ended. "Ulysses?" said Flora. She looked behind her and saw the squirrel sitting on the floor, sniffing his tail. "Come here," she said to him. He walked over to her, and she picked him up and put him on her shoulder. "Look," she said. She stared at the painting. "That boat is getting eaten by a gigantic squid." He nodded. "It's a tragedy," said Flora. "There are people on board that boat. Look, you can see them. They're ant-sized, but they're people." Ulysses squinted. He nodded again. "They're all going to die," explained Flora, "every last one of them. As a superhero, you should be outraged. You should want to save them. Incandesto would." "Ah," said Dr. Measham, coming up behind them. "You're studying the poor, lonely giant squid." "Lonely," said Flora. "Excuse me." "The giant squid is the loneliest of all God's creatures. He can sometimes go for the whole of his life without seeing another of his kind." For some reason, Dr. Measham's words conjured up the face of William Spiver, white-haired and dark-eyed. Flora's heart squinched up. "Go away, William Spiver," she thought. "That squid is a villain." Oh, wrong voice. Back up. "That squid is a villain," Flora said out loud. "He needs to be vanquished. He's eating a boat. He's going to eat all the people on the boat." "Yes, well, loneliness makes us do terrible things," said Dr. Measham. "And that is why the picture is there, to remind me of this. Also, because the other Dr. Measham painted it when he was young and joyful." All right, here's a picture of the picture. And like last time, I'll make sure to actually put it so you can see it better. Good grief, thought Flora. What did he paint when he was old and depressed? "Now you'll sit on the horsehair sofa, please," said Dr. Measham, "and I will bring out jelly sandwiches." Flora sat on the couch. Ulysses was still on her shoulder. She put up her hand and touched him. He was warm. He was a small engine of warmness. "The giant squid is the loneliest creature in all existence?" said Flora out loud. And then, to keep things grounded, she muttered, "Seal blubber." And then she whispered, "Do not hope. Instead, observe." She kept her hand on the squirrel. Chapter 39. The Tears Roll Off. Dr. Measham came out of the kitchen holding a pink plate with small sandwiches on it. She sat down next to Flora. "You are enjoying the horsehair sofa?" she said to Flora. "I guess," said Flora. She wasn't sure exactly how someone enjoyed a horsehair sofa. "You will eat a jelly sandwich?" said Dr. Measham. She extended the plate to Flora. Ulysses leaped off Flora's shoulder and into her lap. He sniffed the plate. "Our patient is hungry," said Dr. Measham. "He never had breakfast," said Flora. She took 2 sandwiches and handed one to Ulysses. "This sofa," said Dr. Measham, "is the sofa of my grandmother. She was born on this sofa in Blundermeakin. She lived the whole of her life there, and she's buried there in a dark wood. But that is a different story." What I meant to say is that when I was a girl in Blundermeakin, I sat on this sofa and spoke with my grandmother about inconsequential things well into the gloom of the evening. That is what a girl in Blundermeakin did in those days. She was expected to speak of inconsequential things in the gloom of the evening. Also, she must knit. Always the gloom was descending in Blundermeakin. Always, always one was knitting outfits for little trolls. What little trolls? Said Flora. And where's Blundermeakin? Never mind about trolls for now. I meant only to say that life was very gloomy then, and one was always knitting. Sounds lousy, said Flora. It was exactly this. Lousy, said Dr. Measham. She smiled. Her dentures were very bright. There was a smear of grape jelly on one of her fake incisors. Flora reached out for another sandwich. Had terrible things can happen to you ever warned against eating jelly sandwiches in the house of a woman from Blundermeakin? Your father is a lonely man, said Dr. Measham. Very sad. To leave you, that broke his heart. It did? Said Flora. Yes, yes. Many times George Buckman has sat on this horsehair sofa. He's talked of his sadness. He's wept. This sofa has seen the tears of many people. It is a sofa that is good for tears. They roll right off it, you see. Her father had sat on this couch and wept as the gloom of evening descended? Flora suddenly felt that she might cry too. What was wrong with her? Seal blubber, she thought, and the words steadied her. She handed another sandwich to Ulysses. Your father is very capacious of heart, said Dr. Measham. Do you know what this means? Flora shook her head. It means the heart of George Buckman is large. It is capable of containing much joy and much sorrow. Oh, said Flora. For some reason, she heard William Spiver's voice saying that the universe was a random place. Capacious heart, said Dr. Measham. Random universe, said William Spivers. Capacious, random, heart, universe. Flora felt dizzy all of a sudden. I'm a cynic, she announced for no reason in a too loud voice. Bah, cynics, said Dr. Measham. Cynics are people who are afraid to believe. She waved her hand in front of her face as if she were brushing away a fly. Do you believe in things? Asked Flora. Yes, I believe, said Dr. Measham. She smiled her too bright smile again. You've heard of Pascal's wager? No, said Flora. Pascal, said Dr. Measham, had once said that since it could not be proven that God existed, one might as well believe he did, because there's everything to gain by believing and nothing to lose. That's how it is for me. What do I lose if I choose to believe? Nothing. Take this squirrel, for instance, Ulysses. Do I believe he can type poetry? Sure, I believe it. There is much more beauty in the world if I believe such a thing is possible. Flora and Dr. Measham looked at Ulysses. He was holding half a sandwich in his front paws. There were blobs of grape jelly in his whiskers. Do you know what a superhero is? Said Flora. Sure, I know what a superhero is. Ulysses is a superhero, said Flora, but he hasn't really done anything heroic yet. Mostly he's just flown around. He's lifted a vacuum cleaner over his head. He wrote some poetry. He hasn't saved anyone, though. And that's what superheroes are supposed to do. Save people. Who knows what he will do, said Dr. Measham. Who knows whom he will save? So many miracles have not yet happened. Flora watched as one of the jelly blobs on Ulysses' whiskers trembled and fell in slow motion onto the horsehair sofa. All things are possible, said Dr. Measham. When I was a girl in Blundermeakin, the miraculous happened every day, or every other day, or every third day. Actually, sometimes it didn't happen at all, even on the third day, but still, we expected it. You see what I'm saying? Even if it didn't happen, we were expecting it. We knew the miraculous would come. There was a knock at the door. "See," said Dr. Measham, "this will be your father, Mr. George Buckman." Flora stood and went to the door and opened it. It was her father, and he was smiling, again, still, which did seem kind of miraculous. "Hi, Pop," she said. "You see," said Dr. Measham, "he smiles." Flora's father's smile got bigger. He took off his hat. He bowed. "George Buckman," he said. "How do you do?" Flora couldn't help it. She smiled too. She was still smiling when a noise that sounded like the end of the world echoed through the hallway of the Blicks and Arms. One minute her father was standing there with his hat in his hands, smiling, and the next minute Mr. Klaus, the cat one, came out of nowhere and landed right on top of George Buckman's unprotected head. All right. Now, the next chapter, chapter 40, is all pictures. So you should pause the video right now and go find the pictures for chapter 40 called Vanquished. And I'll label them 1 and 2 so that you know which one comes first. So pause and then come back when you're done looking at those, and then we'll move on. Chapter 41, I Promise. They were in the car. Flora's father's hands were on the steering wheel at 10 o'clock and 2. Flora was sitting up front, and Ulysses' head was out the window. They were heading back to Flora's mother's house in spite of Flora's protestations. "We have to go back," said her father. "We have to return at the regular Saturday afternoon time. We have to act normal, natural, and unconcerned." Flora wanted to object, but she couldn't read the writing on the wall. Or rather, she couldn't read the words that hovered above her and her father and the squirrel. Destiny could no longer be forestalled. The arch nemesis must be faced. So in her little comic book imagination, they're about to meet up with Ulysses' archenemy, which is her mother. "Holy Bagamba," said her father. His right ear was wrapped in a huge amount of gauze. His head looked lopsided. "Wholly anticipated occurrences. A squirrel vanquished a cat." He shook his head and smiled. "And now it's time for another battle," said Flora. "Everything will be fine," said her father. "So you say," said Flora. It started to rain. Ulysses pulled his head back inside the car. He looked up at Flora, and the sight of his little whiskered face calmed her somehow. She smiled at him, and the squirrel sighed happily and curled up in her lap. "When I was a girl in Blundermeakin," Dr. Measham had said to Flora when they were all leaving apartment 267, "we wondered always if we would see each other again. Every day was uncertain, so to say goodbye to someone was uncertain too. Would you see them again? Who could say?" Blundermeakin was a place of dark secrets, unmarked graves, terrible curses, trolls everywhere. So we said goodbye to each other the best way we could. We said, "I promise to always turn back toward you." I say those words to you now, Flora Belle. I promise to always turn back toward you. And now you must say them to me. "I promise to always turn back toward you," Flora said. She whispered the words again now to the squirrel. "I promise to always turn back toward you." She put a finger on Ulysses' chest. His tiny heart was beating out a message that felt like, "I promise, I promise, I promise." Hearts were the strangest things. "Pop?" said Flora. "Yes," said her father. "Can I feel your heart?" "My heart?" said her father. "Okay, sure." And then, for the first time ever, George Buckman took both his hands off the steering wheel while the car was in motion. He opened his arms wide. Flora gently moved Ulysses out of her lap and reached onto the seat beside her. And then she reached up and across and put her hand on the left side of her father's chest. And she felt it. Her father's heart beating there inside him. It felt very certain, very strong, and very large, just like Dr. Measham had said. Capacious. "Thank you," she told him. "Sure," he said. "You bet." He put his hands back on the steering wheel at 10 o'clock and 2, and the three of them, Flora, her father, and the squirrel, traveled the rest of the way home in a strange and peaceful silence. The only noise was from the windshield wipers. They hummed back and forth, singing a sweet, out-of-tune song. The squirrel slept, and Florabelle Buckman was happy. All right, one more picture of Flora feeling her father's heart. This Flora is a little different from the Flora we were introduced to at the beginning of this book. Seems a little different now. All right, y'all. You have a dialogue journal. I have answered your dialogue journals if you finished your Monday assignment. So you'll need to go back and answer the question that I left on the right side of your dialogue journal. And if you're confused about that, come to office hours or just shoot me an email. And have a great day.